Welcome. Today's question had so many wholesome reactions, so by popular demand, we brought it back again as a prequel to the other videos. And the question, again today from A Piece Potato is: what's the most wholesome experience you've had with a stranger? Hi, this is Derek. I just put the Drama Llama, Fred, back in his llama pen, so that I can do this quick video for you with some of the stuff that Fred found on Reddit earlier today. Oh boy, let's get ready for some drama. Levitating Penguins answered with: I had been living and struggling in NYC for 3 years, when my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's. I decided to move back down south to be closer and help out. It was a huge, scary, life-changing decision, and I didn't know if I was making the right call. I had been working in book publishing and trying to follow my dreams, but it just wasn't what I thought it would be. On one of my last nights in town, I got into a cab to meet someone for dinner. The eerily prophetic cab driver just looked at me in the mirror and asked, "You are leaving this city for good?" I told him I was, and he said, "Yes, you have met many fancy animals with human faces." As I got out of the car and said goodbye, he said, "Well, we have met before 1,000 years ago or so, and I expect we will again." I think about that guy a lot. And yes, moving was the right decision. Musab2310 answered with: once I worked at a bookstore. Saw a big heavy-set dude in overalls come in, and I assumed he'd beeline right to the gun magazine section of our store, a rural area, so you kind of got a feel of where people would go once they walked in. So I didn't initially pay him much attention. I turn around from checking a person out of the main registration area, and he's standing there waiting his turn patiently. So I asked him what he was in need of, and he mentioned he had a book on order held back for him. He said it was the book, 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Kind of caught me by surprise that a man that looked like a country bumpkin was picking this particular book up, and in my head, I assumed it was for his wife. Found the book and started ringing him up and started chatting with him, and realized the book was in fact for him. I'll never forget what he said, because even though it was such a small moment in life, it changed me a little bit. He said, "I think it's important to read books like this about other cultures than ours. The news always makes the Afghan people seem so bad, but his, Khaled Hosseini, first book Kite Runner gives a good glimpse of what life was like over there and made me think twice about how I was judging those people. Talk about making me feel like an asshole, here I was judging him for how he looked, and he goes and pulls this on me." I purchased Kite Runner that day and read it, and it set into motion a lot of thoughts I had about how I judge and look at others. To this day I try my best to see the position others might be in before I judge them unfairly. And I often fail at not judging people based on how they look, but I now try to remind myself when I do how unfair it is. It was only a 2-minute interaction with this man that I had never seen before and will never see again. But damn if it hasn't likely made me a better person as a result. Eric316WTTN answered with: I'm sitting at a red light with my wife and son. I'm directly behind a yellow school bus full of kids. Some of the kids were just being kids and making faces out the window at cars, etc. A small group of kids were gathered near the back of the bus looking at us. All of a sudden, one kid does the Gangnam Style, crossing the wrists and bobbing the hands up and down part. I do it right back to him, with a huge grin on my face. Then I do the part where you stick your arm up in the air and twirl it around while moving your head back and forth. By this time just about the entire bus was watching, and as the light turned green I heard them absolutely erupting with laughter. Best red light ever. MC in the dorm answered with: I was traveling to the national parks in Utah. In the hotel parking lot, I noticed I had a flat. I was very flustered because I was worried about the cost of replacing the tire, on top of the rental company charging me extra. As I was struggling with the tire, a group of Hispanic men came over to help me out to replace. They offered me a Corona beer, and we all shared a beer, and they took me through the process, guiding me but still having me do most of the work on my own as a learning experience. They refused a tip at the end. I'll also add that this was a formative moment for someone growing up in the wealthy white South. Growing up, my only interactions or memories with people that were Hispanic were moments like my parents not letting us play outside when the neighbors had a Mexican lawn crew out. My parents complained when the Spanish-speaking waiter messed up our order, etc. Even though I wasn't racist, that moment made me stop and think of my parents and people I grew up with in a different light. It made me go from all races are fine to wow, my parents and the people I grew up with are a major problem. FL1P1 answer with. More than 20 years ago, when I was still a teenager, I was on vacation with my parents. There were a lot of problems and fights I couldn't handle, and it came to the point that I had a suicide attempt. I snuck out of the hotel room, crying rivers, and tried to jump off a railing in the courtyard of the hotel. A cleaning lady must have seen me. At the moment I was on the other side of the railing, the lady pulled me back to her side, took me in her arms very firmly and lovingly stroked my head while crying and told me that everything would be okay. Every pain passes. I could never say thanks, but this lady changed my life and I never had such terrible intentions again. She gave me something no one else could do at this moment. Thank you, stranger woman. Outrageous claims answered with. Was working at a store that sells electronics. Younger kid came in and said he needed a laptop for his new business. I said, what's the business? He said it's just a clothing line, but all the jobs are given to people in recovery. And I said that's very admirable, and I couldn't help get teary-eyed. And he said, has addiction touched your life? And I said, both my parents are addicts. He said, mine too. And then I said, do you want a hug? And then we hugged for like 20 seconds and both cried a little. I sold him a laptop, wished him well, and I felt really warm and fuzzy for the rest of the day. He was a good kid. Lelia Cat answered with. I was a teenager hanging out with some friends at a Waffle House. The only other person there was a very large, scruffy, middle-aged man at the counter. He looked like a biker maybe. He waved us over to him and we went over there. As a young woman, I assumed he was up to something creepy, but we went over there. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a stack of colored paper napkins and then proceeded to fold paper roses for me and my friends, including the guys in our group. He wasn't a creep, just an origami enthusiast, and I learned not to judge a book by its cover. A few years ago, I was experiencing deep depression. My life was a mess, my apartment was a mess, I was a mess. For a moment, I decided to just go to the park and sit for a while, as I was really at the end of my rope and had zero ideas on what to do. Out of nowhere, a kid, possibly about 3 or 4 years, comes and hands me 3 yellow dandelions and runs back to her mom. I don't know why, but I always remember that. That day, I went home and cleaned my apartment, and made it more tidy. I wouldn't say that my life miraculously changed, but I will say that one moment of kindness, that neither the kid nor the mom probably remembers, was one of the most memorable moments in my life. Edit, you guys realize you are making a grown-up ugly cry, right? I mean, that must be criminal. Thank you so much for your lovely comments and rewards. Gardenia Guardian answered with. About 10 years ago, me and my sister, as young adults, had a little girl on the bus to Disneyland sign something and take a picture with us because we needed a signature from a real princess on our trip to make all of our friends at home jealous. I thought the little one was going to die of excitement, she was so cute. But once we got done with our autograph, she lectured us saying, you know, you two could be princesses too. You're nice and you are at Disneyland, you just need a crown. We were fresh out, so she conducted our coronations right then and there. I'll have you all know that I am Princess Gardenia_Guardian, Louisa said so. Also, her parents were so effing nice they tried to buy us lunch afterward. It just warms my heart thinking about it. I hope she's still growing up happy and sweet. Dash Ninja answered with. There was one year where I was in Spain on holiday with my family. We were staying in an apartment complex that had crane machines to win soft toys and prizes. So one day my sister and I are downstairs playing on the machines, but we didn't manage to win anything and ran out of money. And a man who was sweeping and mopping the floors comes over and unlocks the machine and hands us both a Winnie the Pooh toy. Was one of the nicest things someone's done, and I still remember it 20 years later. Sunny on the Farm answered with. I was just at a super stressful time in my life. My housing situation was precarious. I was seriously underemployed. I was working too much. And the 2016 election was literally a day away, and I was so worried about it. I had done an event for work, and on my way home I stopped to get some gummies from a 7-Eleven. I just like gummies, okay? Anyway, there was some kind of problem with their card reader. It literally broke while I was in line, so when I got to the front they couldn't take my debit card and I had no cash, so no gummies for me. I left them on the counter and sadly walked away. I lived around the corner from this 7-Eleven and was walking home when I heard someone behind me yelling, I turn around and there's this big black guy chasing me. I stop and he comes up to me and hands me a bag of gummies. "Can't go without gummies," he said. I thanked him profusely. I regret not hugging him. I went home and cried because I was so happy about these gummies. Honestly, I didn't have a lot of money in my bank account. And these gummies were probably going to be the last thing I bought before my next paycheck. It was such a small thing, but it meant so much to me. I'm crying now thinking about it. I'm so grateful to that man. Cilantroduction answered with. There was a time once, about 2 or 3 years ago, when a young woman near me, who was talking on her cell said, "I miss my mom." She was sad. I had a family trauma prior to that day, and my eldest son and I had become estranged. I missed my son, and at that moment, my youngest son was in the hospital from the related traumatic incident, and I was also sad. My daughter, my BFF, was also in shock and right by my side during this time, and I was there for her too. Anyway, I digress. This woman, who was a similar age as my kids, ended her call. We were walking in the same direction, several feet apart. I just looked over and said, "I miss my kids, too, hon. I know your mom loves you." She started crying. I just walked up to her and gave her a mom hug. She cried so hard. I was crying. We just stood there and cried in the middle of the city. Total strangers. I kept telling her that love never dies. Even in death. Love is eternal. We finally composed ourselves. Hugged and went our way. I still think about that day. The Ant Pants Dance answered with. My husband was away for work for 3 months, and I lived far away from family. My son is 3, he is 100%, and doesn't sit still. I was exhausted working parent doing it all. My son and I went to eat at Chick-fil-A one Saturday. We never go to sit in restaurants, because he can't sit still long enough. But I was craving a spicy chicken. We sit down in a booth and my son was acting as he does, and not sitting still. I'm about to leave and pack it all up to go because he was disrupting this family sitting behind us and I didn't want to ruin their meal. The mom sees him struggling and invites my son to eat with them. They had a few older kids, 5 to 7-ish, and my son sits with them and eats, and they entertain him for 20 to 30 minutes, while I sat in my booth eating my meal in peace. It was the nicest mom move that a mom has ever done. She saw the struggle I was having and tried to help. Her kids even shared their chicken nuggets with my son. It was so sweet. Salty Pants answered with. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon just came out in theaters. I had been planning to go see it on my next day off. I didn't have a car so relied on the bus. The day of the movie came and then there was a snowstorm. I walked downtown to get the bus but there was a sign saying all buses canceled due to snow. I was super bummed out and walked over to the local coffee shop. I ordered a coffee and was telling the owner how disappointed I was that I couldn't get to the movies. There was an older woman sitting in the shop and she overheard us. She looked at me and said, "I really want to see that movie too. Let's go, I'll drive." So that day me and a perfect stranger went out to lunch and to see a movie together. About a year later I started seeing this guy in town and his downstairs neighbor was the lady who took me to the movies all those months earlier. We had stopped by her house for her to get a sweater before the movies. I told the guy me and your neighbor went to see Crouching Tiger together. He was like, "That was you?" She went on and on about how cool it was to go to the movies with you. And finally, Carnivine7 followed with, "Marry him, ask her to officiate the ceremony, and then sell those rights to Hallmark, Penny." Seriously, though, I love this story. Thanks for sharing it. Well, there you have it. A perfectly great question answered by a bunch of fine and honorable citizens. Help support this channel by smashing the like and subscribe buttons. And hit that silly little bell as well to ensure you get the latest videos as they come out. Fred is always finding stuff for me to post regularly. So this is Derek signing off. Thanks for watching. Good grief, it sounds like Fred is out of his pen again. I think he found more drama for me to share with you. See you soon.